Hi everyone, this is Mr. Moberg, and this screencast is answering the question, what are the parts of a wave? Throughout it, make sure you take notes and draw pictures. There are going to be quite a few questions that prompt you to either discuss or ponder and think about a question. Make sure to pause your screen and do that, as that should be super helpful practice and feedback for you. And please ask questions if you have them. Your teachers and your peers are happy to help you out. Let's recall some things you should know about properties of waves. 1. Light travels in a straight line at a constant speed in the form of a wave. 2. Different types of light waves equal different types of energy. And 3. Electromagnetic radiation is energy in the form of a wave. So let's connect. Shaking a rope like in the image above is a good visual for picturing invisible light waves or radiation. I think it's helpful because radiation is invisible and we can't quite see it, but this rope actually provides a pretty clear example. They both require energy to make the wave happen, and they both take on the shape of a wave. I'm going to tour you through some different parts of the wave, so make sure you take notes here as we go. Let's start with the word crest. When I hear the word crest, I think about the peak or top of an ocean wave, and it's actually very similar to radiation waves. The crest is the top or peak of the wave. Let's apply that and make sure you got it. Which wave in the image here has the most crests, and how many crests are in letter B? Pause your screen right now. This is one you can either do with others or you can ponder by yourself. Okay, now that you've had a chance to pause and think or discuss, which wave has the most crests? Well, letter A has the most amount of crests by quite a bit. And how many crests are in letter B? Well, let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 crests in letter B. Then we have the word trough. When I hear the word trough, I think about a container or basin that a horse might drink out of. And it's kind of similar in the shape of the wave. The trough is sort of that shape that might have the ability to hold water. The trough is the bottom of the wave. Let's try that out and make sure you got it. Which wave has the least troughs, and how many troughs are in letter B? Pause your screen and either discuss or ponder. Okay, now that you've had a chance to do that, which wave has the least troughs? Letter C has the least amount of bottoms or troughs. And how many troughs are in letter B? Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 troughs in letter B. We then have the word wavelength. The wavelength is the distance from the crest to the crest or the trough to the trough. You can see here in this GIF below, the wavelength is traveling across from crest to crest. We use the word longer and shorter wavelengths when we compare waves. When we use the word longer wavelength, again, we're talking about the distance from crest to crest, and this is a longer wavelength because there's a greater distance. And then when we talk about shorter wavelengths, we're talking about the distance from crest to crest being shorter. Let's apply that and see that we understand. Which wave has the least wavelengths? Which has the shortest wavelength? And how many wavelengths does letter B have? Pause your screen now and either discuss or ponder. Okay, let's go through it. Which wave has the least wavelengths? Letter C has the least amount of wavelengths. Which has the shortest? Letter A, as there's the shortest distance from crest to crest or trough to trough in letter A. And how many wavelengths does letter B have? 5. Let's count. I'm going to go from trough to trough. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 troughs. We then have the word amplitude. Amplitude is not a word we're going to use very much, but I do want to just briefly mention it. Amplitude is the height of the wave. We see here when we compare these two, this wavelength has a high amplitude because it's really tall, and this one has a low amplitude because it's not very tall. It has to do with the amount of energy that wave carries. So let's stop and discuss this question right now. The tortoise and the hare, or the rabbit below, are shaking a rope attached to a pole. What is the difference between the two waves they are creating, and what is the cause? And you should have some vocabulary to maybe talk about that right now. So please pause your screen and discuss the question. Now that you've had a chance to talk about it, let me review a little bit. So when we compare the two, the hare has created a pretty short wavelength. And we'll see here that that rabbit appears to be shaking the rope quite a bit faster. And what that means is to create a shorter wavelength, it actually requires much more energy, so the wavelength itself carries more energy as well. And then when we look at the tortoise is not shaking the rope very fast, which results in a longer wavelength. This is very directly connected to this term we're going to use called frequency. Frequency is the number of waves that pass by each second. So if I take a look here at this line, every second that goes by, however many waves pass by, is going to tell us what the frequency of that wave is. If I compare a low frequency and a high frequency wave, I see here on the top, these two frequencies are what we would consider a low frequency because not a lot of waves pass by this line every second. Whereas the color here on the bottom, we would consider this a higher frequency because a lot of waves pass by in a given second. This is actually very connected to energy because, as we know, the bottom waves have a higher energy and also a higher frequency, while the waves on the top here have a lower energy as well as a lower frequency. Let's apply this to a few questions. These ones can be a touch trickier. So compare and contrast the waves above. Which has more energy? Which has a higher frequency? And which has a shorter wavelength? Pause your screen and either discuss or ponder. All right, let's go through those. So the one that has the most energy is letter D. Just like the tortoise and the hare, in the hare example, that wave that had the shortest waves had required the most energy to make and therefore had the most energy. Highest frequency, also letter D. Every second there are more wavelengths passing by on letter D than the other waves. And which has the shortest wavelength? Also letter D. Again, the distance from crest to crest and trough to trough are the shortest on all of these letters, or letter D. Let's consider, this is a question that some students struggle with. We've learned that the waves below have different amounts of crests, troughs, wavelengths, frequencies, and energy. Which, if any wave, is the fastest traveling wave? Pause your screen, discuss, or ponder this question. Didn't mean it to be a trick question, but sometimes students do get tricked and they say that this wave here down on the bottom is going to be the fastest wave because it has the most energy, while that actually isn't true. All light, no matter what the energy in it, travels at the same speed, and we call that light speed. Here's an example that I think is kind of helpful. We have two kangaroos hopping. The one on the top makes a lot more hops, but yet it travels at the same speed as the one below it. The difference between the two is the speed at which they hop, not the speed at which they travel. Lastly, I'd like you to meet ROYGBIV, which stands for red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. These are all the colors of the visible light spectrum that have their own wavelength and energy or frequency. We're going to go into much more depth with what these waves do when they interact with matter. Let's recap some of the important things that we've learned. 1. Waves have crests, troughs, amplitude, and wavelengths. Frequency is how close the waves are together, and this is directly affected by energy. And ROYGBIV are the individual wavelengths of the colors in the visible spectrum. I hope this screencast was helpful. Please seek your teacher or peers if you have questions. We'd be happy to help you out.